All right, Danny boy.
What's up, Jerry? I think what I was trying to do was trying to figure out like who I am, and like not wanting to go the corporate route and trying to just just work a job. So I was a trainer. Before that, I coached CrossFit. Then I coached weightlifting. CrossFit led me into weightlifting. I trained under Bob Takano. The gym shut down, so then the remaining athletes started our own club called Nomad Barbell. So I was like an assistant coach there for like 2.5 years, and in that process, that was when I started Onyx. Just I wanted to get. I was going on REI and buying nylon webbing, cutting them and taping the ends together and giving it to my teammates. And one day I was leaving REI and I was like, how do I get this in red leather? Because I think weightlifting and leather goes hand in hand, because the longer you do weightlifting, the better you'll get if you work on your technique. It's just like leather, like the longer you use it, the more character it becomes part of the leather. So to me, it just kind of felt like it was like they go together. So I went to Tandy's, bought like a $500 beginner tool set, bought some dye, bought some leather, and then fucking tried sewing it myself, And then luckily I was hand stitching it for a little bit, not really knowing what I was doing. So I learned everything off YouTube. And then my neighbor, she was like a old Vietnamese lady. She was a seamstress. She had a sewing machine, so she started sewing the rectangles on the straps for me at the very beginning. And then I bought a ticket to the 2016 Olympic trials, which was also nationals in Utah. And I started the business maybe like a month or two before that. Then I just packed a bunch of like bags, bunch of straps on my bag, and was walking around trying to sell straps, trying to talk to people. I didn't sell anything, but like I met some people from Florida, along with the people that I would see from like the local weightlifting community in Southern California. But I met a few people from Florida, and then they kind of embraced me. We hung out, and then they kind of helped me grow Onyx in Florida a little bit. And then, yeah, just one thing after another. And
Did you just feel like
I didn't know what I was
stuff
I didn't know what I was doing, to be honest. I just wanted to. I was in a. I think I was stuck in a rut, because I was like, I think around that time I was kind of depressed. I was doing the same thing I've been doing, not really getting ahead, not really falling behind, but I felt like I just needed. I figured, I'm like, oh dude, you know what? Like one day, no one uses leather straps in this style. So it's like one day all these CrossFitters are gonna be tired of wall balls and burpees, but they're gonna like snatching, and no one makes straps in this style in multiple color leather. So I just kind of went down that route of like, all right, I gotta learn everything about leather that I can. And I would spend so much time, because I didn't have a sewing machine, so I would just hand sew everything, and doing everything wrong before I learned, like I made every single mistake possible. And like if I looked at my first wallet I ever made, I remember specifically thinking, I'm like, all right, don't skip any holes, just make sure you hit all the holes when you're hand sewing. And like looked at it, I was done. I'm like, oh, I skipped a hole there, skipped a hole there, fucked it all up. But like it was like I was proud of it. I was looking at it, I'm like, damn man, this is pretty good. And then the next one I made was like a little bit better. Like looking back now, like they don't look that great, but when you make something new, you always think that that's the best one that you made. Like it's always, oh yeah, and you always learn a little bit of something on each small project that you do. So yeah, I kind of just went down a rabbit hole of like, all right, like how do I learn how to like work with leather? I thought before I bought the tools, I thought I could just like take by the leather and just go cut it with a scissor, and then I was just gonna tape the ends. And they were like, no, you can't do that. Like you need tools. I'm like, what do you mean? I can't just use like a scissor? Like it's leather. I'm like, what does that mean? And he's like, oh, you need a knife. I'm like, oh, I never fuck with tools. So yeah, then I bought a toolkit and I fucking made my first set, and then that was it.
Do you happen to have any like OG straps from years ago?
I think they're in the shop. I think they might be in the shop.
Display them.
Yeah, I had a
50 years from now, they might be going into the Smithsonian.
Yeah, I think there's like a bag inside the shop somewhere. Either that or my mom's house, but I think it's at the shop because there's like I remember seeing it and I pulled all of them out and I laid them all out like, fuck, a few years ago. So they should still be in the shop. I think.
Yeah.
So.
Alright, so you just saw a need in this in weightlifting. We're like, all right, let's do this that exists, but let's do it better.
Yeah, because I've always been like, I've always liked art, like creative stuff, like making stuff, and I was obsessed with weightlifting. So like to me, there was like, oh, this is like where like physical activity and like art like meet for me specifically, because I was like, I gotta learn. I'm trying to get better at weightlifting, and I know that like a lot of people need this thing, and then there's like this creative side of me that like needs to be like, I just need to kind of like learn shit. So then it just one thing led to another, and then like I mean that's pretty much how it all started. Yeah.
So I mean, fast forward to now, Onyx has been around for quite a minute. Like I think like over 10 years?
No. Let's see. 2016 to 8 years.
Okay.
8 years.
Okay.
Next year will be our 9th year in business.
All right. So still quite a minute, quite a while.
Yeah.
In the sport, I mean, in general, but specifically in the sport, small businesses come and go.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the difference between a company that sticks around for a long period of time and a company that kind of hits the ground running and then disappears after like a year?
I think what it ends up being is like, one, like what's ultimately like your end goal, because like my end goal wasn't to like make a shit ton of money. It was more of like, oh, I got this new like project that I'm working on and I got to learn more about leather, and then like that passion kind of like overtook like the idea of like trying to make a shit ton of money from it. It was more of like, oh, I like weightlifting and I like creating stuff. So I think the passion for what I was doing, and I think like a lot of companies, like they start brands and they start doing things because like, oh, like it's the cool thing to own a brand or whatever. Like I think that kind of like clouds your sight of like, oh, I just want to make a bunch of money from this. Like, for me, it was like, oh, I want to make something that other people can use, and like I find enjoyment in like creating it. Like, oh, what kind of colors can I use? Oh, this will look cool. Like, so I think for me it was like more of like, like the creating stuff just to create stuff because there was a passion behind it, and it wasn't, oh, like I'm gonna start this brand and I'm gonna make a shit ton of money from starting this brand, and like Onyx is still a small business. We have employees. Like none of the owners take a lot of money from it. It's more of like, all right, how can we support other people, like with this thing that we're making? And if we were lining our own pockets, then you can't put the money back into the business. And then I think that's what happens with a lot of business. They get so excited or, like caught up in the entrepreneur. I even hate that word. I don't even consider myself an entrepreneur. I know that I am, but I hate that word because there's like this, I don't know, stigma or like this like thought that people like, oh, they're entrepreneurs. They think they're fucking hot shit or whatever. I'm like, no, like I don't work well in corporate, because I like to always try to figure out like my own version of like how to get this process made faster or like better. So like the times that I've worked for like somebody else, like or another like a company, I've always tried to like figure out like another way of doing it, and I think people don't like that. You know, I think people want you to kind of like fall in line. And for me, I was like, well, what if I'm doing the same repetitive thing over and over again? I'm gonna try to find a faster way of doing it, you know. And so I think I kind of went around in circle answering that question.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think it's just like you got to be passionate about the thing that you're making. You got to believe. And then there was a lot of like situations that kind of help point me or kind of keep me like remind me that I'm like, hey, you're on the right track, even though like you're struggling right now. Just keep doing it, you know, because like somebody's gonna appreciate this. So, yeah.
And then over the years, you've gotten to work pretty close with the weightlifting community.
Mm-hmm.
What do you find special about weightlifting? You know, weightlifting is such a small niche.
Man.
It feels big to us, you know.
Yeah.
It feels like there's so many people, but compared to other sports, man, like we're just this tiny speck on the map.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, since you know, from your CrossFit days till now, what growth have you seen in the sport? What's special about the community? Does the size of it, you know, being small, does that make it more unique, more special? Do you wish it could be way bigger, or do you think it should stay how it is?
I think that it should. I wish that it was way bigger, only because I realize what kind of positive impact weightlifting had on my life and like my views, just like my perspective on everything. It's so hard to do, like to compete, to train for competition, and you only get like 2 hours. So you train like 3-4 months to get 6 lifts, and then after you're done, you realize, oh, I could have been better. So then you go back in another training cycle and you do it over and over again. So just that process alone, I think helps shape people's like, self-confidence for the better. And so that's why I wish that it was bigger. But I understand why it's small, because it's so hard. You know, there's a lot of people that come into the sport. They'll do it for maybe like a year or two, and then they're done because they expected themselves to be so much better than they currently are, because maybe they were powerlifting before, so they have like this base strength, but then their expectation of themselves getting better at snatching it takes longer than they expect, so then they kind of like fall off. So I think that like if people could see like what kind of benefits weightlifting does for like you as a person, I think it would be a lot better or a lot bigger. Because like it's like, you know, you go in, you do the same thing over and over again. You snatch, different variations of snatch, you clean, different variations of cleans, and then jerk, same thing. But then every time you do 1 rep, you know, your coach tells you you're doing it wrong. So then you're like, okay, cool, like let me go back in and try to fix that thing. So you're constantly searching for like the perfect technique, the perfect lift, and you hardly get it, you know? So when you do, you get that like kick and like, that one felt so good. And then you go back in and you do it over and over again, and you might not hit another like one that feels like that for another few weeks or so, you know? So I think that like, that's the thing that like hooked me. I kind of forgot your question.
No, that was good. The other half of that question was your involvement in the community. Since you go to these events so much, what makes the weightlifting community special?
And we're all weird. Because who the fuck likes being told you're doing it wrong every day, but then you go back in and you do it again, you know? So I think like one thing for me that helps me connect with weightlifters easily is that like we're all in the same sport. We all know how hard it is. And, you know, like because of that, like you kind of just gravitate towards each other. Like if there was like a room full of like people, you know, powerlifters, weightlifters, CrossFitters, general fitness, bodybuilding, you know, like, well, we're, you know, the other weightlifters doing something really hard. You know, I'm sure bodybuilding's hard too. You know, they all have their own like different types of hard. But like weightlifters, there's a huge mental side of it, the technique side of it, you know? So then like you automatically assume that like, okay, they've been in this sport long enough, their effort to be better at this one thing where you have to like generate a lot of like power and then athleticism and like, you know, like spatial awareness and all that shit. Like, oh, okay, like this person's kind of like me, you know? And then you kind of like just find that like you guys have a few other things in common, you know? So I think that's the part that like makes it easy for me to connect with people, I guess. And plus I'm like I think I'm a fairly friendly person and I like knowing people's story. So I'm like, I want to know, well, how did you get into weightlifting? How did you, you know, how was your training cycle like? What are you planning on like opening at, you know, at competitions? And just, you know, everybody's journey is different. So I kind of want to know more about everybody's like journey. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered that right.
Yeah. No, that was awesome. And then to wrap things up real quick, you know, just kind of seeing your journey from before Onyx to you just going to REI and, you know, buying those straps and then getting leather and trying to just put that shit together with tape.
Yeah.
Now, keep like that in mind. What would you tell your younger self, your 15, 18, 20-year-old self?
Well, what I tell my 15-year-old self, you don't always have to do what everybody else is doing. You know, sometimes you find yourself when you are just doing you, you know, like you don't have to always fit in. You can always just do whatever you feel is right. As long as you follow your heart, if you follow like what you feel is right, and you give it up to God, you'll be able to, you know, figure shit out, you know, because like one, if you don't do it right, there's a lesson there. And you apply that lesson to the next thing and, you know, eventually some shit will work out. And if not, there's a lesson there too. Like, oh, maybe that wasn't the path. So I think there's a lesson in everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, bro.
I think that's, so I got ADHD. I forgot the question already.
You answered it, man. You nailed it.
Okay.
All right, bro. That's it, dude.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Thanks for coming in, dude.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate your time.
This is cool.
All right, you ready for a little shoot?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.